everyone. Welcome to the Academic Integrity and Plagiarism lecture. My name is Professor Warren, and today we'll go over all about what academic integrity is and what is counted as plagiarism. So, hopefully you've watched the videos that we had in the discussion board and you've answered your discussion post completely, just sort of skipping through these. And we'll start with this idea of what is plagiarism. Essentially, plagiarism is theft. If we had to sum up that word, that's how I would sum it up, right? It's theft. And it's theft whether you intend to do it or whether you don't intend to do it, right? So if you're intentionally plagiarizing or unintentionally plagiarizing, maybe you accidentally, meant to paraphrase and you didn't in-text cite at the end of that paraphrase, or maybe, you quoted something and you didn't put quotation marks or a, in-text citation with it. It doesn't matter. The university still considers that plagiarism. So it's one of these things that, when you do citations and when you are utilizing other outside resources or other people's words, their art, etc., you need to make sure that you're giving credit where credit is due. All in all, again, plagiarism is just bad. Remember that as we go through, right? I've done a lot of trainings, and I've also taught a lot of trainings where we discuss why students cheat or why they plagiarize. And the reason is, usually the number one reason is they run out of time, right? So I just want to emphasize, right, plagiarism is bad. Don't do plagiarism. It'll be harder for you, in the long run. It's better to turn in a project or an assignment, halfway done, but it's your own work, rather than turn in a complete project that you cheated on. So again, don't plagiarize, never do it, but let's go a little bit more in detail about, what is plagiarism and why we have to cite. So let's go really quickly into why we cite. Again, the reason we use citations, the reason why we use in-text citations, parenthetical citations, is because it's giving credit where credit is due. It's just the right thing, right? If you came up with a great idea, or you used a piece of art, you would hope that those who are inspired by it or enjoy your work would also give you that credit, right? Citing also just allows you to show, hey, this is where I've got this information from, and this is how I'm building on my argument, right? And that's always good because, again, while you guys are students and you don't have your degrees yet, it's good that you utilize the voices and perspectives of people who do have higher degrees or experience to back up your argument, right? So utilizing citations and other people's words to help bolster your own original ideas is good credibility, it's good ethos. It shows, hey, my argument is justified. Other people can justify my claims. Again, citing just shows where you've taken these ideas, which are your own. Again, it's good to cite what other people say because your professor can see, hey, this is what somebody else has said, this is what my student is saying, and I can judge the quality of your argumentation and your elaboration based on, again, utilizing other people's citations or works to help justify your claims, and then see the quality of how you can develop those claims, right? So citation helps with your credibility, it helps you give credit where credit's due, and it also lets me see what is it that you are saying and what is it that somebody else is saying, and I can see, oh wow, this student does have really good ideas that they develop based off of other people's ideas, right? And all in all, again, citations just, help us to acknowledge those whose work we're using. So what needs to be cited? So these are all the things that need to be cited. Direct quotes, both entire sentences and phrases, paraphrases, both rephrase or summarized material. We'll go over in a little bit about the difference between paraphrasing and summaries. There is a bit of a difference, although they're very similar. Words or terminology specific to or unique, so neologisms, to the author's research theories or ideas. So again, if somebody comes up with a word that doesn't exist, right, you need to give credit to that term. Use of an author's argument or line of thinking. So again, when you create your own original idea or argument in your paper, you definitely might be inspired by someone else's argument, right? Don't rip their entire argument and use it as your own, but you can definitely be inspired by it. or you can definitely cite their argument and maybe debunk why you don't agree with it, right? Use of historical, statistical, or scientific facts. Sometimes you need to cite those, and sometimes you don't. And we'll talk a little bit of why this is. Graphs, drawings, or other such collections of information, essentially, that's pretty obvious. Articles or studies you refer to within your text, images, YouTube videos, songs, and original artwork, right? Again, anything that's created by somebody else or said by somebody else, that is their own original ideas, and you need to cite them. So, this is one of the most prominent examples of sourcing issues. I'm sure on the right-hand side we've all seen the Obama Hope image by Shepard Fairey. Shepard Fairey was actually sued by the Associated Press, their photograph that's on the left-hand side, because they said it's too similar to their own photograph, right? That Shepard Fairey's Obama Hope image was too similar to their photograph. And photographs are, again, artwork. We, look at photographers and classify them as artists, right? So that is their property. That is their intellectual property. So Shepard Fairey did lose the case, but they settled out of court. But this just goes to show, right? You might look at this image and think that, that's not plagiarism. But to others, that's definitely plagiarism, right? The way that President Obama is facing, his posture, his facial expression is dead on to Shepard Fairey's. The only difference is Shepard Fairey recolored his and put the word hope, right? So one way Shepard Fairey might have been able to get away with this, right, is to ask the Associated Press if he could, do this, right? Maybe he would show them beforehand before he published it and made money off of it. Or simply, maybe gave credit and changed this image more so. This way there wouldn't have been this issue of plagiarism. So common knowledge. A few slides ago I just said that sometimes historical or scientific data does not need to be cited. And the only time it does not need to be cited is if it's common knowledge. So again, common knowledge would be anything that the general public would know, such as, the sky is blue, oxygen has an atomic number of 8. Other things that don't need to be cited would be like proverbs, axioms, and sayings, like a stitch in time saves 9. The reason why is proverbs, we don't know the original author or person who created that proverb. They've just been passed on through culture over centuries, so that doesn't need to be cited. Sometimes well-known quotations don't need to be cited, so the one, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And other common knowledge things, such as Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, or Starry Night was painted by Vincent van Gogh. However, if you ever come across a time in your research or while you're writing your paper and you're unsure if it's common knowledge, I would just go ahead and find a source that you can cite from to cite that information. So again, if you're unsure if it's common knowledge, your best bet is to just go ahead and cite it. It's not going to hurt you to cite it if you're a little bit iffy on whether it should be cited or not. Self-plagiarism. A lot of students don't think that they can plagiarize themselves, but you definitely can. Self-plagiarism does exist. And self-plagiarism is essentially using older work that's already been graded and passing it off as something new. And this also extends to if you ever become an academic researcher and you publish a paper in one academic journal and then you try to take the same one and publish it in another journal. That would also be self-plagiarism, and it would just really damage your reputation in academia. Self-plagiarism is wrong for these reasons. So it's the antithesis of what research papers are about. So again, during this course, we're building on academic discourse or academic conversation, right? And if all researchers just republished everything that they found, we wouldn't get anywhere as a human collective, right? We have to have researchers who are building off the ideas of others, but in new and exciting ways, right? So you can't just keep publishing the same thing over and over again, otherwise you're not adding anything to conversation. Moreover, again, if you self-plagiarize, so say for instance you turn in an old paper from high school and your teacher didn't ask you to cite something, right? Or maybe you didn't cite something correctly and your teacher didn't catch it. You might submit it to me, and again, if you submit it through online, it goes through Turnitin, which is a self-plagiarism checker, it might catch it that time. And so then you would be charged with plagiarizing, right? So again, some old work you might have used stuff that you forgot, right? That you had paraphrased from someone else or quoted or misquoted it. And then you turn it in, you can get in trouble, right? And moreover, you're not growing as a writer, right? Again, this is school, you're here to learn. So if you keep turning in the same work over and over and over again, you're not growing, you're not learning how to be a better writer. So it's just all around a bad time. If you ever want to recycle something from an existing paper, just ask me. Likely I'm going to tell you no. But the things that you could use from an old paper are maybe some sources that you used, right? Again, you have to come up with a new argument, not the old one you used. But definitely if there was something else in that source that could be potentially useful, you could definitely reuse that source and cite it correctly. That's always an option. Or you could take maybe, for instance, you argued against GMOs, but maybe in a new paper you want to argue for GMOs, right? So again, that would be changing it enough, and again, you'd have to change the paper significantly, but again, that's sort of, I would say, the limit to how you can reuse old papers, right? Maybe you changed your stance on a topic, or you utilize sources old sources in a new way in your new paper. Form and content. You can also plagiarize not just someone's words, but also the phrasing of their words. So again, that would be things like you take someone's quote and you just change out some keywords, right? That is plagiarism. So again, changing words from past tense to pretense, right? Or just rearranging someone's sentences. That would still be plagiarizing, right? You can't just take someone's sentence and say, oh, instead of the word explain, I'll change it to explaining. That would still be plagiarism, right? So make sure you're not just changing things from one word to another synonym of that word. It needs to be your own original ideas, and even then, it needs to be cited. So how do you avoid plagiarism? So the three main ways you do that is, again, paraphrasing, summarizing, or quoting, right? Paraphrasing is when you restate, condense, or clarify another author's ideas while also providing credibility to your own argument or analysis. Paraphrasing must have in-text citations because they include information that is not your own. A lot of students think paraphrasing is what I just talked about. You change synonyms. That is still plagiarizing. Paraphrasing is when you read something from someone and you put it in your own words, right? You completely put it in your own words. You're not just changing synonyms. And then you also in-text cite them, right? Because again, you didn't know that information before you read that person's work. The difference between paraphrasing and summarizing, which again, summarizing is taking say for instance an entire article and boiling it down to its essential components, which would be, the author's main argument, their supporting claims, what they found, and then your thoughts about it, right? The difference between a paraphrase and a summary is that a paraphrase is usually a chunk of that text, whereas the summary is the summarization of that entire text, right? So that's basically the difference between a summary and a paraphrase. Paraphrase, you're only paraphrasing a particular portion of, say, a book. A summary would be telling me the entire book. And here I have for you paraphrase and summarized examples. Those are things you can look over here after this lecture, sort of look through that and see the difference. And quotes. Quotes, again, are taking that exact phrasing and putting quotation marks around them with an in-text citation, right? And it's important to use quotes sometimes, more so than paraphrasing and summarizing, right? Sometimes someone says something that you know you can't say better than they can, right? And so you need to quote them, right? It's just so good, and you're like, the way they said it, it would really bolster my argument, right? I would say use quotes sparingly. You definitely want to paraphrase or summarize more in your paper, but use quotes sparingly and use them where they'll really pack a punch. So here's a few paraphrasing examples. So let's look at the original. It says, differentiation is an instructional approach, promotes a balance between a student's style and a student's ability. Differentiated instruction provides the student with options for processing and internalizing the content and for constructing new learning in order to progress academically. The first example, again, the one I just read was the original. Let's look at the first example of a quote-unquote paraphrase. Differentiation is a way to encourage equality between the approach and talent of the student. This type of instruction gives students different ways to deal with and grasp information and for establishing new learning to move on in education. This is definitely a no good paraphrase because what this person did, and you can see from where I've underlined, they didn't rewrite this in their own words and, put a good in-text citation. What they did was they put the in-text citation, but they literally just copied and pasted what the author said and just changed some key words, right? That's all they did. They just used a synonym of the word. So for instance, if you look after and, for the original, it says and for constructing new learning in order to progress academically. If you look at the paraphrasing, and for establishing, again, that's just a synonym of constructing. New learning, again, that's word for word. To move on, again, a synonym of in order to progress academically in education, right? They even start the same, and if you look, it's literally too similar to the original, right? A better paraphrase would be example 2. Teachers use differentiated instruction to help students learn, allowing the teacher to cater lessons to the way each student learns and each student's skills. Again, it's saying exactly what the original quote said, but it's in its own, it's the author's original words, right? So they took what the original said, they understood it, they processed it in their minds, they utilized critical thinking, and then they wrote it out in their own words, which would be example 2. But they made sure to also in-text cite it, right? Because they didn't know that information until they read the words of Thompson, right? So they made sure to give academic credit, but a paraphrase, again, is not changing keywords, it's reading something, understanding it, synthesizing that information, and then utilizing your critical thinking skills, writing it out in your own words. So, the best sort of method to sort of go about this class is this idea of transparency, right? I understand as you're going through this course, you may have never had to in-text cite before, right? Or maybe you're still working on the way you cite sources, right? I get that. As long as you're transparent with me, right? It's obvious that it's not, you're not stealing someone's work and trying to pass it off, right? There's genuine attempts at trying to cite, right? That's all I really ask, right? Now, again, you have to improve on your citations to get good grades, but if I can definitely see, hey, this student is being open where they got their sources, but they may not be, perfectly citing, right? That's all I can ask for, right? As long as you're transparent with me, kind of like a pane of glass, right? I can see what it is you're doing. You're not trying to hide things from me. That's all I really am looking for in this course, right? Be open to criticism when I'm saying, hey, this is too similar to the original, rewrite it, right? Or, hey, your in-text citation's not correct, right? Make sure you in-text cite correctly, right? As long as you're transparent with me, I'm more than happy to help you learn how to cite correctly. And this video you can watch on your free time. Sort of wraps up, this is from the UNC Writing Center, sort of wraps up the ideas we discussed in class today. I highly recommend just watching this. It does a really good job of summarizing, why we have to cite and why we're contributing to academic conversation. And very quickly, we talked about citation a lot. Well, let's look at the ways and the guidelines in which you cite. So again, these are the main ways you will cite sources likely. So again, if you're in the humanities, including things like theater, English language, and literature, you're likely going to be citing your sources in MLA, and that's what we'll be using for in this class will be MLA. APA, and I have it underlined here because likely whatever degree you're getting, more likely will use APA, because APA are guidelines for those who are in the fields of psychology, education, the social sciences. There's also Chicago Manual Style, CMS. These are for professional publishers and scholars. There's AP, Associated Press. If you get into news writing, magazines, newspapers, public relations, you'll be citing things and utilizing their writing guidelines and formatting. AMA, again, if you go into the medical or healthcare field, you'll be using that one. There's Turabian style for theses and academic papers, and Harvard has their own Harvard style. again, Purdue OWL is your best friend. So if you don't have a MLA handbook on you, Purdue OWL has everything that you need. If you click on Purdue OWL, you could find the MLA section. They also have APA there too, and it'll tell you how do you cite a book, how do you cite a book with 2 authors, how do you cite a YouTube video, how do you cite whatever it is, right? This is where I'll refer you to every time you ask me a citation question, right? I'll say, did you go on Purdue OWL? Did you find what it is you're looking for? So make sure that you probably have this bookmarked in your web browser. And these are the references I use, so if you want any additional clarification, just follow these links and you can, look for better clarification if you still need it in order to understand academic integrity and plagiarism. So, hopefully you found this lecture interesting and you learned something. Again, hopefully we won't have any issues with this, but, I'm letting you know what's considered plagiarism and what's not. I look forward to reading all your papers, and thank you again for listening to my lecture.